And on this Newsmaker Hour, it's going to be Senator Kirsten Gillibrand starting things off with a press conference from yesterday. And this is an important one if you're a small business, farmer, and trying to get help as far as small business loans, unemployment goes. You'll want to listen to this one with Senator Gillibrand. Coming up later, Democrat congressional candidate Tracy Mitrano on the same topic. And that'll be both in this half hour, starting out with Senator Kirsten Gillibrand here. Dr. Bob, of course, coming up at 8:30. Again, Senator Gillibrand now.
With the coronavirus pandemic spreading across the country, rural communities face unique challenges in their ability to respond to this crisis. Our rural communities often operate on thin margins. Their hospitals provide vital community resources, yet across the country, rural hospitals have closed, and those that remain are struggling to access resources to combat coronavirus. Small businesses and family farms that are key to the tax base of these communities are being forced to close. They are facing mounting debt and are at risk of not recovering when the crisis is finally over. The challenges that rural communities face, especially during this public health crisis, demand direct and comprehensive solutions. Currently, rural communities have to wait for federal funding to trickle through state bureaucracies, or must compete for federal grants that are often too narrow and inflexible to fully support their needs. In order to be fully supported, communities must apply for multiple grants and try to stitch together the funding needed to address their problems. Then, when they do find the right grants, the applications are time-intensive and technical, and often require hard-to-find data to complete. Rural communities often lack the staff or the community development organizations that are critical to successfully pursuing funding opportunities. Our system simply doesn't work for rural communities. It burdens them with a bureaucratic maze to find the right grant for their specific needs. At a time when everyone needs direct access to resources to combat the coronavirus pandemic, it's critical that our rural communities are not left behind. That's why I'm urging Congress to include direct financial funding for rural communities in the next COVID economic relief package. They could even use the framework created by the Rebuild Rural America Act, which Congressman Delgado and I introduced last fall. This framework would directly address the needs of our rural communities by providing a dedicated, non-competitive block grant to towns with less than 50,000 people or counties with less than 200,000 people. In the past, those smaller communities have been left out of the community development block grant programs and have had to wait for the state to apportion money to them. The Rebuild Rural America Act and the proposal I am advocating for today would establish a fund of at least $50 billion dedicated solely to serving the needs of rural communities. It would give our rural communities the funding and flexibility needed to ensure rural residents have access to public safety, emergency management, and temporary assistance. Leaders in rural areas do not have the time or resources to wait for funding to funnel down to them. They need money to support their local hospitals and emergency services now. Relief for our rural communities should be just as accessible as it is to our cities. In order to get through this crisis together, then we need to strengthen our national investment in rural areas and in small towns. Including the Rebuild Rural proposal in the next COVID-19 relief package is critical to ensuring that all Americans, no matter their zip code, can recover and rebuild after this crisis. I'm proud to work alongside Minority Leader Schumer and Congressman Delgado to strengthen New York's rural towns. Rural New York contributes enormously to our state, and this new dedicated fund will empower these communities to address their complex challenges and help them better regrow their economies.
Hi, this is Perry Teasdale at the Columbia paper.
Hi.
Hi. One of the questions I have is about independent contractors It turns out that for the PPP loan, if that's what you had working for you in a small business, you you wouldn't be eligible for that grant. The individuals could apply for some assistance, but the organization, the company, can't. And I'm wondering if there's any thought that you've given to how to handle people in the gig economy.
So independent contractors are treated as small businesses under the SBA lending part of the last COVID-3 bill, and will be also considered as part of the COVID 3.5 bill we're working on now. Independent contractors may not have relationships, though, with major banks that typically work with the SBA. And so what we're trying to do in this next bill is require that about half of the funding go to community banks and credit unions, which will be more likely the kinds of institutions that an independent contractor would have a relationship with. So we're trying desperately to get some of this money into the rural communities and the smaller communities. I also think this provision that Antonio Delgado and I wrote would also be able to be used for independent contractors in rural areas. It would be able to allow businesses in those smaller communities to be able to be funded.
What is the full amount that you're talking about that you'd like to see in this next wave of funding?
So the Rural Rebuild Act, we're allocating about $53 billion is what's in Senator Schumer's proposal. So it's real money to go to rural areas. But in general, the next bill is probably going to be approximately $500 billion. And we're hoping about $250 billion of it goes to small businesses, 150 goes to states and localities, and another 150 would go to hospitals. There'd also be money for food stamps and food banks, because a lot of people are hungry and food insecurity is on the rise because people have lost their jobs. Over 20 million people have registered for unemployment in the last few weeks. So we're hoping that this next 3.5 package can go again to the most at-risk, at-need places. But we're trying to make sure it goes to all the small businesses, not just the ones who are well-connected.
It's the Newsmaker Show. I'm Brian O'Neill, and we have Tracy Mitrano, the Democrat candidate for Congress, running against Congressman Tom Reed, coming up in the second segment in this half hour. Right now, we continue with Senator Sen Gillibrand. She's got an official here from the Hudson Business Coalition.
Hi, this is Monica Byrne from the Hudson Business Coalition and the Hudson Development Corporation. Senator Gillibrand, the plight that you described of rural communities is identical to the plight of our small and micro Main Street businesses and their ability to access aid through the programs that we have right now. As I'm sure you're both aware, both the PPP and the EIDL programs have myriad issues, including the fact that they're not sufficiently funded. We need a small business continuity fund for upstate New York that is similar to the program that was created by the city for small businesses, and New Jersey and the state of Pennsylvania have similar programs as well. Our small businesses have no way to leverage access to the dollars that are needed because our local governments are also too small to really have the power to make something happen. We need your power and your voices to help the state create a program that creates a low bar to entry, direct access for our small mom and pop businesses that may only employ 3, 4, 5 employees, but still provide a crucial service to their communities, still create the character of their communities, and still represent millions of jobs when you put them under one umbrella. So we would really appreciate your support in creating something like that.
Well, this is exactly what the counties could use this money for. So a county government or a small town government can take this grant money that they're about to receive, if this gets included in the package, and do exactly that, do direct grants to their Main Street businesses to keep them afloat. The governor could use this money as well that he gets in the lump sum, several billions of dollars that we will give him in the next package. He could use some of it for that too. And then we want to help, again, the small businesses that exist to apply directly to SBA related banks and allow them to get these grants directly from their local lender. We want that money to get to the smaller community banks, and that's what we're trying to do in this bill, so they will be able to get access to those loans and hopefully turn them into grants.
One other quick question, if you don't mind. I would like to know on a separate topic what we can do to provide testing and other support for our essential employees, specifically the people who are working in grocery stores, the lower paid people, the people who are more vulnerable, and make sure that they are being well cared for, and also that they are not acting as vectors for the virus to the rest of the community who they're coming in contact with.
So if the grocery store is unionized, they've done a really good job in getting shields up for those grocery store chains and PPE for the workers. The ones that aren't unionized have done less well on that, but it's chain by chain in terms of how they're handling it. What we can do in the community is try to make masks available. We can make our own masks. Obviously, they're not the same as medical grade masks that we're reserving for our frontline workers in hospitals, but they can work and they can help people. So I would just urge for local citizens to help their local urgent workers, frontline workers, critical workers by providing different protective gear that can be made locally and use local solutions, because getting access to buy PPE is impossible. FEMA keeps buying up the PPE and distributing it to where they want. You could talk to your county execs to see if the county is getting any PPE, but I think it's going to be hard for rural counties, particularly those who have not peaked yet in terms of coronavirus, to get access to that, because FEMA's supposed to be making their judgments based on greatest good for greatest need. I doubt they are, and we've seen them giving supplies to states where they have political relationships.
Next up, a question from WJTN Jamestown.
Hi, this is Nick Balsi with JTN News. I had a question for you about the calls for additional stimulus payments in the next package directly sent to taxpayers. You've probably heard reports about some of the stimulus payments actually going to people who are deceased, or they're being sent to the wrong accounts. People are writing about this on social media and reporting that relatives and family members who passed away are actually getting these stimulus payments. Given those reports, are you skeptical of supporting these future direct payments in another package?
No, I think it's important that we send money directly to taxpayers for the duration of the pandemic. Because if you have, right now we have 20 million people who filed for unemployment. There's millions and more who are still trying to file for unemployment and may not have gotten through. So I think the need to make sure people don't starve, that they can pay their rent or their mortgage or car payments, is absolutely essential. And if there are examples of fraud, corruption, or mistakes, those should be investigated and we should get to the bottom of it. But it doesn't mean the money isn't useful to other people who desperately need it.
I've asked the IRS if there's a system in place for them to recoup the funds if they're being sent to the wrong accounts or to people who are deceased, but they haven't responded. Do you know if there's a way to recoup the funds? And if not, what do you think is the best way to proceed to get that money back?
Those can be simple fraud investigations that the Department of Justice can do. It's the same as tax fraud. So we investigate tax fraud every year, and they find people who breach tax laws. So I don't think it would be handled any more differently than that. And we should actively, of course, encourage the Department of Justice to investigate any instances of tax fraud. But again, if you really want to look for where the sins of the moment lie, it's in the first, second, and third COVID bill, where Mitch McConnell wrote in giveaways to favorite companies and favorite sectors of the economy. And those were millions of dollars given away to different sectors who are their campaign donors. And that's really the most troubling part of Washington, is the corruption and greed that sits at the center, which is money in politics. And so one of the best things we can do after this is really advocate for publicly funded elections and getting money out of politics.
Paul Kirby from the Daily Freeman in Kingston. The theme or the thrust of your appearance today seems to be you and the congressman are urging Congress to approve this, and maybe I got it wrong, $53 billion bill that would give rural communities direct access to funding. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, so it is 53 billion. I just wanted to make sure. And is there a date where Congress might vote on this matter?
Right now, it is in the draft bill that Senator Schumer sent over to Mitch McConnell to say these are the changes we'd like to see in COVID 3.5 to add more money to the SBA and more small business lending. We just want to make sure it reaches all parts of the economy and all parts of our communities. And so this would be $50 billion that would be geared towards rural counties, rural cities, rural small towns, and rural businesses. So that's what we're asking. And so far, it's part of the Democratic response to Mitch McConnell's request for more SBA money. And we think it's a good, strong bipartisan idea that should have support across the board. It's just common sense.
Yep. Okay, thanks.
This is Kate Lisa with Johnson Newspaper Corporation. I just have a quick question about kind of going off of that. So what is the time frame for this COVID-19 3.5 bill? And can you also explain, maybe you did already a little, but I'm still a little confused about how this $50 billion that's geared toward, the rural counties and small towns, what is the breakdown for how they would apply for that funding, prioritization given to certain counties and towns? How would that be determined?
So it would be part of the $150 billion that goes into states and counties. It will be administered just like the state fund in the CARES Act. It would provide direct payments to the counties and towns that need it most based on a formula. And the formula could be a combination of per capita funds as well as disease prevalence, specifically to cities below 50,000 people and counties below 200,000 people.
That wraps things up for the press call yesterday with Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. When we come back, it'll be Democrat congressional candidate Tracy Mitrano and her presser from yesterday. Stay with us.
Mullen Factory Direct Floor Covering has been serving this area for many years. During life's ups and downs, we've never quite experienced anything like this. There's no official day or time set for us all to go back to business as usual, but Mullins wants you to know they're there for you and your flooring projects. And it's also a good time to say thanks to all the loyal customers and remind you to support all area local small businesses to help them stay afloat during this unprecedented time. Be safe and stay healthy. From your friends at Mullen Factory Direct Floor Covering in Almond.
Because of coronavirus, we're all doing new things, like cleaning out our closets, connecting with friends virtually, and making good use of those board games. Because we're staying home, helping everyone stay safe. It's the best way to protect the ones we love, and it's the most important thing we can do right now. So please, stay home. We're better together, but right now, we're safer apart. Brought to you by UR Medicine. Learn more at covid.urmc.edu.
Back on the Newsmaker show now, switching over to the Tracy Mitrano press conference from yesterday. We're going to skip over the opening remarks and get right to the questions from the reporters.
Yeah, Tracy, it's Rick Miller from the Times-Herald. Hi,
Rick.
You're having a hard time campaigning in these kind of conditions, aren't you?
Not really. All last year, I was out on the road. I lived in Chautauqua for 3 months. And I never stopped campaigning. So I have been all over this district and therefore have relations, supporters, people in government or other public-private partnerships or business with whom I remain in contact. Sometimes when you have a crisis, you find things that you didn't know were there when you didn't have the necessity to search. So these weekly sessions that we're having talks with Tracy, very successful. And we wouldn't have done it but for this crisis. The continuing field work that we're doing, talking to unaffiliated voters, we have more volunteers signing up to do it now because they are home and they want to maintain this campaign and they are reaching out. We exceeded our fourth quarter fundraising, bringing in 200 additional people. In the midst of this economic severe downturn, we brought in 200 more people who are giving money to this campaign because they now really see the meaning of good representative government, or by example, the lack of it. So actually, I worked in IT before I got involved in politics, Rick, meaning I transitioned very easily to the use of these technologies. And we are finding that when and where people can connect, they are doing so, and they are learning new ways to share experiences. We've had social hours, we've had town halls, we have fundraising. It's kind of breathed in new opportunities and a certain kind of vitality that maybe we would not have had because we would have continued with the kind of the same old of retail politics. Thanks for your question.
Fred, you had a question?
Yeah, this is Fred Balfour from WRFI Radio in Ithaca and Schuyler and Watkins Glen. Tracy, I want to step back a little bit and get your broader view of what happens when you're taking the plane down to Washington, D.C. to take office and get sworn in. One of the things that getting sworn in is getting assignments to committees in the House, and the House has a rich set of committees. What is your absolute number one choice for committee assignment? And talk about why that's important to all us 23rd District constituents.
Well, I wonder if you will be surprised, I doubt it, if I say education in the workforce. That has been what my campaign really has been all about, education in the workforce, getting this district back on track. And look, every crisis, if you don't treat it as an opportunity, it will crush you. And I have done that in my personal life, and I am doing it now in my goal to represent the people of this district. We will bring opportunity back where we have been stalled before it, in no small part because of the failure of a representative who really didn't care about bringing anything back to this district. He really didn't care about moving us in healthcare, education, and infrastructure into the 21st century. And I pledge to you, we will be in a significantly better place, notwithstanding this crisis, if I can get into Congress, and largely through the influence that I would hope to have, and the collaboration I would hope to enjoy with colleagues in the House working on these issues for a district like this one, and not just for San Francisco and not just for New York City, for the 23rd District. Usually, Congress people have two committee assignments, Fred, and the second one, I would want to be on the Cybersecurity Subcommittee of Homeland Security, and that is because of the background I do have in this area. And I would expect there, even though I would be a freshman congressperson, with my background, I would hope to exercise a leadership role in it. And the two dovetail, because you can't have cybersecurity on nothing. You have to train people. And not all of them are at MIT, Harvard, and Cornell. You may know that I created a cybersecurity program at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, a non-matriculated program in which people were able to get very good jobs subsequently. And I've also been working on some programs for a liberal arts college here in the 23rd District that's a little different. It's less computer science oriented, more communications oriented. So these two things actually have some important connections that would work well for the people of the 23rd District. Thanks for the question.
Let me poke a little harder on that education and workforce question. And I know when you're running a campaign, it's hard to keep track of what's going on in the committees you'd like to be in. So this may be one of those questions you say, I'd rather get back to you later, but what kind of activities within Education and Workforce Committee would directly come back to the 23rd District? And again, if that's a proper question, you sidestep that and we'll talk about it in your next media call.
Fred, I talk about this all the time. It's what I've been talking about since I entered the race. This is the work I've already done 40 years of my life. I have educated thousands and thousands of people. I have people that I've educated who are millionaires out in Silicon Valley, and I have people that I've educated who work in public service all over this state, all over this country. I've been blessed to be a guide to students for 40 years now, and they serve all over because I actually taught in a unusually wide swath of disciplines. I began as a historian. I then moved to social policy, and most recently I've been working in computer and information science on the policy side, of course. But well, I just gave you an indication of how these things connect. We need training programs. We need vocational schools. We need welders. It's not just cybersecurity. I use that as an example. But we need to do something between the junior year of high school and the equivalent of an associate's degree to be sure that the students in this district are prepared for the jobs that before this crisis did exist. I talked to many business people who were saying, we can't find the people, we have the jobs. I don't care whether you're talking about Cummings out in the western part of the district or small machine shops in Bath. Certainly, I've had this conversation with many executives at Corning Incorporated. And there are some good examples where there are schools trying to fill the gap. The alternative school for math and science in Corning is a wonderful example. But there are many, many gaps that we have, given the savage inequality in public education that exists in this district, as well as the gap we have nationally between the kind of education, socialization, and training that students need to work in advanced manufacturing. I want to be a key player in filling that gap. So you can find everyone from Tom Reed to President Obama talking about we need training, vocational schools, trade. I'm going to do something about it. I've already done something about it. It has been part of my life work already. And that is the connection between education and the workforce. And the example I give comes from my experience in cybersecurity.
Thank you.
And that wraps things up with Tracy Mitrano. Earlier in this half hour, we heard yesterday's press call, also a press call there with Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. Coming up, Dr. Robert Heinemann. Stay with us. Newsmaker show on a Friday.